Incoming transmission.
The Klingonese word of the day is Pak.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
So, this is a huge victory for the good guys.
Scotty, beam me up.
Resistance is futile. Live long and prosper.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings and welcome to the Computer Resume podcast. Imagine with me for a moment, if you will, a level of fandom beyond that which is known to casual trekkers. It is a dimension not only of sight and words, but of mind. It is a middle ground between civilians and savants. It is an area known as your local comic book retailer. You've just crossed over into the comic book zone. And I'm your host, writer-comedian, Mr. Todd A. Davis. All right, folks, this is where I would normally do an intro incorporating a bunch of factoids about the guest's life and career, but then I'd be spoiling his new book. It's Michael LeBlanc. Yay! Michael! How you doing, buddy?
Oh man, dude, it's been a roller coaster over these last few months of just being excited for myself and seeing. I mean, you mentioned it. I got a new book, so I'm like, people are like holding up pictures of like the new book and everything like that. I mean,
so let's flash back to we were covering an episode of Enterprise.
Yeah.
Seems like a year ago, maybe, or
it's got to be. Like probably about a year and a half, because you gave me the idea and then I dived into it. November.
So in that conversation, because I've told this story to a couple people off mic, of course, but the funny part about it was you were recommended to me. I had a guest who couldn't make it, and they would try to, hey, I know this person, then this person, and this person. They're all big Star Trek fans, and one of them was you. And so I was like, I reached out to you, we connected, we got it scheduled, you come on the show, and, we walked through the whole thing. And before we started to roll, you were like, hey, before we get going, I have a question about Archer's ready room. He's got those pencil drawings on the wall. I said, yeah. And you're like, is one of those the aircraft carrier Enterprise? I was like, yeah. And you said, I thought I recognized my ship. And it just screeching tires. I was like, hold on. What do you mean? And you're just like, yeah, I was an engineer. I was like, you didn't think to lead with that?
Yeah, it was at that moment I realized that I had a talent for burying leads. So that was a good moment for myself.
Yeah. And and of course, now I consider us great friends. You've been on the show quite a few times. I can't wait for the day where we actually get to meet each other in person and go get some food and give each other a big old hug. But how has this been for you, taking these events that shaped who you are and putting them down on paper and putting them out in the world? Like, what's the highs? What's the lows?
Well, according to my therapist, this is the most cathartic thing I could have ever done. She's pretty happy about that. And no, it really was a very cathartic experience. It turns out that there were a lot of things that had happened to me, because I was in 19 to 23 when I was in the military. Mm-hmm. And people don't really, at that time, they weren't really saying it, but now with the advent of like social media, people kind of agree that we're not done growing by that point. Like, society wants us to be. They want us to be the adults going out there and getting things done.
Of course. So
all these things were happening to me, newly married, going into the military, not doing well in the military, just a lot of stress happening at the time, depression, a whole bunch of things that were coming together. And the only way that I was able to stave them off was either like get lost in video games or, try to spend some time with my wife and just kind of forget about the world. Right. Or, as the title suggests, D&D in the Coffin Hold of the USS Enterprise, I was trying to find nerdy escapes in places that you don't normally think nerdy escapism happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I didn't process any of that. I just lived it, and I kept it inside of me, and it was causing some, I guess I would call it inferiority complexes to grow inside of me, because it's like, oh man, I messed up so bad back then. There's no way I'm going to be able to climb above that station. And so putting all this down on paper, I began to realize I was a kid. I was a kid and I was handling things. And so since then, not only does my therapist think that this was incredibly helpful, and thanks you for the advent of the idea for getting this on paper, but I've also reached out to the VA and said, hey, they're reaching out to people right now too, saying like, even if you got other than honorable, you may still be entitled to medical compensation. And I was like, well, I had all this. It was other than honorable. It's a paperwork discharge, basically. Can I still, can we talk? It's like, you should write a letter explaining the fact on what happened to you and everything like that. And we feel like you've got a case to get some stuff overturned. So
wonderful.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And it all got done over a year, like once I did that first draft in November last year, and here I am heading into November again, thinking about a first draft of a wildly different book. But it's just been wild. And thank you for the beginning seeds of what has grown into a very, very fun bonsai tree to trim and shape and present to the world.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people talk about the writing process, the creative process, filmmaking, a lot of different endeavors where you're getting something from your brain onto whatever medium you've chosen. But most of those people will say that the real shaping of the project actually comes in the editing process. Now, I know you mentioned your first draft. How many drafts did you end up having, and what was it like rehashing, reshaping, rewording this very pivotal time of your life?
Well, by the fourth draft, I thought I had it. I was like, all right, I've got all the spelling mistakes out of the way. I like the way the structure went. I was going with a footnote type thing. And I was like, this is going to be it. It's not going to get any better than this. And then like, I'd give it out to some people. Like a lot of people saw a lot of different versions of my draft, yourself included, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And after every full read, after I would head it out, and what I would do, I had Microsoft Word read it to me. Because if you read it yourself, your brain's gonna put things there that aren't there, like the right punctuation. There's the word.
Yeah.
The right punctuation, sentence structure, all that. Your brain's gonna just mold it so it feels good. But if you have something or somebody reading it to you, you'll hear every glaring problem. So, I think I altogether up until the beginning of September, it was 10 times that I had Microsoft read every version to me. And then eventually I realized printing was going to be a problem with some of my choices. So we moved the footnotes to actual blurbs in the middle of paragraphs, which I think reads wonderfully now.
Yeah.
And in that time, I had people able to get some artwork at the beginning and end of the book, which I think just encaps the entire experience wonderfully. Had somebody help work with my title because not my title, my cover, because I'll be honest with you, there are things that I know that I'm artistically limited in. And I knew some people who made good covers. So between having Microsoft just read me in that robotic language over and over again, and then just like talking with people like, hey, can you give me this art? Can you give me this art? What can I give you if you want this art? Do you want a free book? Do I pay you for this? And all in all, it was a small village to get that together. But that process really 10 months before I was able to finally hit publish.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, for a first book, I think that's kind of a whirlwind's pace.
Yeah. As there's people who spend years, if not a big chunk of their life, trying to document and edit and add to and all of these things to try to get that book done.
Yeah.
And the fact that you were able, first of all, the fact that you completed it,
Yeah.
sets you in a class apart from.
That's what they keep telling me.
Yeah. I'd venture to guess at least 90% of most people. And then the fact that, not only did you finish it, but now it is available for sale. That's got to set you in a class above. So
Yeah.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
I can't wait to crack open my copy and dive in. As somebody who's talked with you a lot and who was there for the initial spark of the idea, I'm really anxious to get into that final product. So let's shift a little bit here, because we are here to talk about Star Trek.
Yes.
In addition to promoting your wonderful work, we're also going to talk about Star Trek a little bit. But today, in case any of the listeners hadn't gathered, we're actually going to be talking about something different. This is a new territory for us, but it was one of the things that when I first sat down and made plans for this show, this was something I wanted to do. And now we are finally getting to do it here at the end of, technically this is a chapter after the end of season 6 of the Computer Resume podcast, but we are discussing our first comic book entry into the chronology, Star Trek Discovery Aftermath. So Michael, let me ask you, have you read many comics, and have you read many Star Trek comics?
The most Star Trek comics I have read were Next Generation comics that Ryan had laying around his bedroom when I visited his house one time.
Yeah.
And he had a couple of like just straight up TNG, and then TNG and X-Men, which was a wild story, but they made it work as much as they could on paper. And other than that, I've had a good bit of Civil War read, both in my hands and also some PDFs that we would share together. Growing up, just here's a bulky flash drive with a few comic books on them.
Right.
But when I was even younger than that, read a lot of Spawn.
Really? Yeah.
How
do you feel about Todd McFarlane's Spawn?
I still love it. The intro for me was revelatory of this. It was the first time I really got to sink my teeth into an anti-hero, and as dark and as gruesome as it was, it wasn't something that I had really, messed with all that much. And so the the main character being just aptly named the Violator, I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, there's a tone to this comic book I think I can understand. And I used to draw versions of Spawn like all the time. Not well, but yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. And so like the various versions that have come out over the years, I mean, the movie was okay. The various retellings, because Spawn takes place as like a multi-dimensional, multi-timeline arc.
Yeah.
And so it's really wild to just all these years just pick up like even like a relatively new one and be like, the feel is still the same, but the line work is better.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's fun. If anybody out there is hearing this and has not heard of or read Todd McFarlane's Spawn, it's the story in short is Todd McFarlane was working for, I believe, Marvel, along with a few other creators who were kind of upset at, as Todd McFarlane puts it, the suits who don't know how to make comics, making the decisions for the creatives who actually do the work. So he, along with a few other superstars at this point, broke away and created the company Image. And they had a handful of titles when they first started up, one of which, of course, was Spawn.
Yeah.
And if you're interested, highly recommend checking out the first 100 issues of Spawn, because it's kind of that's Todd McFarlane's arc. That I mean, there's a few other writers, were there. And of course, the art changed hands a couple times. Greg Capullo was very influential in that series as well. But it is a real slice of the 90s into the early 2000s, anti-hero. It was very unique. And when the movie came along in 97, it was there at the beginning, long before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, long before Chris Nolan's Batman series. There was Todd McFarlane's Spawn,
which is amazing considering how young Image Comics was to get a movie off of a story that they were, basically was leading the charge for Image. And no, it was I think I got into like the first like 40, 45 before it just got to the point where it was harder for me to find. Right. And so like I picked up like stories later. But yeah, it was something so different. And, there's been times where I've like listened to Todd McFarlane talk about his process, and they were talking about, hey, I noticed that you drew this differently in between panels. One pouch was on one hip on the other side, then it switched on the other. What's up with that, glaring incontinuity? He's like, the suit's alive. And then he went with it. He's like, what? take inspiration from wherever you can find it. And I'm like, dude, I fuck with that. That's great.
Yeah. He's there's a lot of different opinions about Todd McFarlane. His personal thoughts and his political beliefs and all this, that, and the other thing. But at the end of the day, Spawn is a big chapter in the history of comic books. Now, getting back into Star Trek, specifically
pivot.
Getting back into the Star Trek comics. The Star Trek comics have had an interesting history as well. A lot of it told through Alan J. Porter's book, Star Trek, A Comics History. If there's anybody out there who's interested in comics and their history, specifically the Star Trek comics, I highly, highly recommend picking up his book. He breaks down everything, and it is a fascinating look. But getting into this is obviously, we're talking about Discovery. So this is New Trek. So this is in the age where IDW has the license, and when IDW got the license, they also got a lot of the ankle weights taken off. A lot of the shackles were removed. Alan's book really details a lot of the restrictions, and to be honest, you can just look at the artwork and see where the restrictions were of like, it was Captain Kirk and Spock and her and the whole gang. However, they didn't have the rights for the actors' likeness. So you can call them those characters, but they can't look anything like them, which is understandably confusing. But with this particular story, we've got writers who are working on the show involved in the process. When the very
and you
wonderful,
felt it too.
It really does come across when Heather Antos, who's the editor for Star Trek over there at IDW, came on the show. She kind of gave me the overview of like, I'm getting the scripts very early, and we are making sure that these things are in line so that the comics feel like the shows. And I'm like, first of all, thank you.
Right?
Because that's been an issue for a long, long time. But yeah, this is a really interesting sort of postscript to season 2 of Discovery. Season 2 ends in a big, huge battle between the Enterprise and Discovery, and them facing off against artificial intelligence control, and Section 30 artificial intelligence, which has taken control of Section 31, and it is a bonkers final chapter to that season. Just giving overviews, staying fairly free of spoilers. How did this hit you on your first read? These 3 issues of Star Trek Discovery Aftermath.
I think it was, for me, it felt like it was needed because they had opened up a few cans of worms, not just one, a few, and the contents were left to be thought about, maybe even dreamed about, depending on how deep you were into it. But this book addressed some of those things, and I thought it was really needed. The character arcs that kind of set up for later too, like the tone for Strange New Worlds and whatnot. Because having seen Strange New Worlds and then going back and reading this, I felt like it didn't feel like anything was being shoehorned. I felt like everything fit together, and that was great.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I've said this, a couple of people have talked to me about, hey, I haven't watched Star Trek and I really want to get in. My first thing is, well, I've got a podcast I can recommend to you. But when I do inevitably recommend probably newer Trek, I feel like newer Trek is very accessible for folks who have not seen any Star Trek. And I recommend Discovery. I said, look, you can do one of two things. You can either watch Discovery from beginning to where it currently is, which as of this recording is 4 seasons. The 5th season's coming out very soon. Or you can watch season 1 and 2 and then jump to Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you choose season 1 and 2 to Strange New Worlds, there is that gap. Like, we see Pike sort of back in the chair of the Enterprise, and okay, Discovery's gone, and all right, let's head home. And we see a little bit of a debrief and that whole thing. But when we catch up with Pike at season 1, episode 1 of Strange New Worlds, he's got a beard, like things have happened, and we're like, wait, we must have missed something. Now, this series doesn't address everything,
no,
but it is a nice bridge from Discovery into Strange New Worlds, getting to wrap up a couple of things, specifically a lot of the political dealings with the Klingons. And I thought that was one thing that was really addressed very well in Discovery was, yes, they are a warrior race, but there's politics, there's backhand deals. There's, quite literally stabbing in the back sometimes. And to be honest, with Discovery season 1, spending a good chunk of time in the mirror universe, to see the Klingon Empire have all this infighting and all this stuff going on. And really, L'Rell, we've not held back our love for L'Rell on this show, really kind of spearheading the move to actually join the Federation. Any thoughts about that before we get into spoiler territory?
It's nice to see, like you were saying, to see the layers of the Klingons that other shows have dabbled in, but it's always more of like they don't show it as something that's ingrained. They always kind of show, oh, this person doesn't want war. He's an offshoot. He's way out left field. We don't really think about him too much. In fact, let's throw him in a penal colony. But this one right here, the way that Discovery showed that, war's always on the surface, but there's so much more underneath. And you're right to say, we got love for L'Rell, because as much as the Klingon Empire has layers, she's representative of all of them as like one person. You can see like all of it just kind of balancing there on one character. And so even when, she's being her most absolute Klingon self, you can also see the person who wants to sympathize and wants to be part of that greater universe all at the same time. It's such a balancing act. It's amazing.
I still love that they call her mother, and she demanded the title of mother because of its fierce power. But I think being a guy with no children, I think another important part of that parental figure is wanting a better life for your child. Wanting peace, wanting happiness, wanting prosperity. And the fact that L'Rell sees that within the Federation and wanting that for her people, while at the same time remaining 100% Klingon.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It is a tough balancing act. And I think this, we get to see some really great interactions between Pike and Spock, but yeah, I think the stuff with L'Rell is really
really
what
good.
it really takes center focus here. Well, we've hinted at a couple things. We've talked about a few others, but before we go too much further, let's get to this week's recap. Brought to you in part by our Patreon supporters, Rev J, Jerry Antimano, Cosmic Crit, Kitty B, David Willett, Ed Milner, and Fleet Admiral First Class Fred Sims and Ren.
Spoiler alert.
Folks, it's a comic book. Go read it. Go on. Go. Okay, so we
love that.
Yeah, I thought that would be fun. So let's get into this. You mentioned something when we were talking about you and your experiences within the military of not feeling sure of yourself and being in a very not only stressful place but a confusing place, and being in the Navy, a fish out of water.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of that is very similar to how Spock feels throughout season 2 of Discovery, and we kind of get a little bit of that here as he's coming to the end of that journey, the end of the end of that trek, if you will, where he's coming out of this fog of dealing with the Red Angel, and really seeing, okay, I'm not crazy, but I'm not fully reinvested in Starfleet. Hence, he has the beard. He doesn't wear the uniform, which L'Rell points out.
Yeah.
Did you identify with Spock at all? Seeing what he's going through juxtaposed to what you went through in your service. Did you see yourself in Spock at all?
Well, one of the great things about the way that they presented him in that is I think that a lot of people can. I mean, I definitely could. Yeah, to answer your question, because there were times while I was in the military where there were personal problems at home, and unfortunately, I couldn't go hide at home for a while and then wait for the Navy to come knock on my door with a comm badge and like, come on. But instead I was forced to go back on the ship. But I felt like I was in that same kind of fog while I'm on the ship. And if you're there and you're trying to do what they want you to do, which for me was it was called qualifying. I had to basically learn new watch stations to be a better nuclear operator until eventually I sit at the top of the qualification chain, which is nuclear reactor operator.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm in that fog. I'm constantly thinking about everything else. And on top of the fact that I feel like, that no way to dice it. I thought I was a failure. And so why even try, and then, there were times where I felt like the steps would eventually stack up to the point where I could climb up and do what I had to do. But those moments are so far and fleeting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. Something else that kind of struck me, we've talked about some of the story elements, but one of the wonderful things about this literature is it is also a visual medium.
Very much.
And with New Trek, one of the things that I think hit people, some people really dug it, there were a lot of people who didn't, was the fact that the camera moved. We got lens flares.
Flare.
Yeah, the lighting was very different. Now, when you're reading these comics, there's a trick that I'm looking at a couple of pages here where there's quite literally light shining in the lens, for lack of a better term, of the camera.
Yeah.
And giving us that vibe. Like, visually, how do you feel that these 3 issues of Star Trek Discovery Aftermath how do you feel that did they capture the visual feeling of Star Trek?
Well, I mean, the opening ones right now where they're dealing with Kronos, Kronos, no R, Kronos.
Yeah.
And just the simple red light through the clouds.
Yeah.
I mean, light and angle. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, they're drawing these things in almost a cinematic way that you would probably enjoy seeing them on TV.
Yeah.
So not only is that cool to look at, and I feel like it adds much more depth than some comics I've seen before, but it's also that thing that it helps to keep it tethered to the show as well, so you don't feel too far removed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I noticed once it gets to L'Rell having a back and forth with Pike, there's a lot of blue. There's a lot of blue and blue light.
Yeah.
And if you go a little bit further, we see, once the story follows Pike as he's on the bridge of the Enterprise, there's even more blue. But then it cuts to a flashback. And that flashback has that sepia tone to really kind of that first page of that flashback, top left corner, says Vulcan before. Yeah. So I was just kind of like, man, you really didn't even need that. Like, I get that there is a difference. There is a difference here. We've gone from a lot of blue light and a lot of dramatic angles to actually some tighter shots of some faces. The sepia tone really kind of sells that it is a flashback. Yeah. And we get to see young Spock and young Michael interacting with each other. And then, of course, we jump back to the present, which was cool. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun because, in fact, that scene is very reminiscent of some of the early scenes in J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek, which is kind of fun because Michael wasn't a part of that narrative, but in this, she is. And then, of course, we jump back into present day with Spock there in the cave, and he gets some interactions with Amanda, and he's really starting to come back to himself and come back and be present in the present. Let's talk about some of the things here with we get the character of Kor, who's a Klingon and makes his presence very well known in the original series. How was it seeing a younger Kor in this, and us kind of getting our first glimpse of, besides the Enterprise and her crew, something outside of Starfleet appearing in a new Trek narrative? How did you feel about how they used Kor here?
Remember I was talking about layers? How they're introducing layers in this. It's cool because you're seeing somebody who obviously has aspirations and is willing to step back enough to see where the pieces are on the board, and then be like, all right, well, this is where I need to be right now. It's cool to see the mind at work like that, who is not necessarily at the top. Yeah. And so it sets those, I don't know, the inner machinations that you want to see play off later. And I love that.
Yeah. For as more recently, Star Trek Enterprise has been getting a lot of love. Of course, it's been getting some love on Strange New Worlds, and and throughout the franchise, you hear little bits here and there of sending Enterprise some love. But one of the things that I thought was really fascinating was the fact that in season 4 of Enterprise is where Manny Koto really made those steps to tie Enterprise to the rest of the franchise. Yeah. And so I feel like this would probably be one of Manny Koto's favorite comics.
Like that.
Manny Koto, Manny Koto, rest in peace. I feel like this really would have been right up your alley. I don't know about you, but one of the things, reading this story that deals very heavily with politics and the Klingon Empire, which, for lack of a better term, is a society-wide military.
Yeah.
I kept thinking about like Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing, and I kept thinking about Tom Clancy and stuff like that, of like, it's political intrigue, but there's also action elements as well. I guess that leans more towards Tom Clancy type stuff, but like,
well, at times. Sometimes Tom just went straight in for the action, Yeah,
exactly.
Sometimes. But I mean, good Trek does that too.
Yeah. I was going to say, outside of, did this give you vibes of any other intellectual properties, like outside of Trek?
I mean, I can't help but be reminded of Marvel, especially around the Black Panther era when that was being released, because it was around the Civil War arc, both in comic books and movies. Is one thing that they did really well, and that is when shit hit the fan really quickly and people had to react.
Yeah.
So when that explosion happened, and everybody's scrambling and whatnot, and it was who was that who was standing there at the time? Basically, the window explodes behind him, and I was like, and I was reminded very much of the Black Panther when where his father was standing there and everything.
T'Chaka,
T'Chaka, thank you.
Yeah,
horrible with names. Good for you.
The fact that I was able to pull those out, I'm kind of proud of myself, honestly.
But Marvel's done that too. Sometimes less. Sometimes they go for the movement, the shock and awe, the fight scenes that you can't make sense of. Depending on who's ever directing them, it's all just quick movements and angles. But one of the good things about what I felt Black Panther is it showed not just what was, going down in the fight between Killmonger and the discord that he was bringing, but it also showed what was going on in the rest of the world. And then, if you think about it, we're talking, which is one of the things that's always awed me about Star Trek, is that we're not just talking about a world's political climate, which they will address, but it's so much of a bigger network, which I try to pull from that kind of sense in the sci-fi book that I want to write. So I don't know, you might see some borrowed elements there.
The political discourse of a people, like you said here, is so much richer. And I feel like that's kind of a, from my experience in service in law enforcement, one of the things that, they drill into your brain at the academy of like, hey, there's no such thing as a typical traffic stop or stuff like that. But the broader idea is that it's not that simple. Nothing really is. And
that's true.
When you're talking about a planet's political discourse, and our planet is going through it seems to be
at the time of this recording, there's a bunch of stuff going down.
But again, it's kind of this country, that country, and all of this stuff, but Star Trek challenges us to look even wider of how is this affecting this entire planet. And then in terms of Star Trek is like, and then how is that planet affecting other planets? Earlier this year, they finally confirmed, like, aliens are real. And it the level of apathy of the human race was
we've got too much
comical.
going on right here. We'll pay attention to that later.
Yeah, exactly. But it's I think Star Trek continues to challenge folks of, yes, this all of these things are very important. But at the end of the day, that idea from Gandhi of, be the change you want to see in the world. So I have a couple friends who are activists, who are doing things in Australia. and there's stuff going on here in the States. There's stuff happening overseas right now,
Yeah.
in the Middle East, and it's all it can be terrifying, it can be heartbreaking, all of these things, but the planet will spin one full time, and tomorrow's a new day. And how can we make this better? Okay, I feel like I'm digressing into a more political discussion than I really wanted to.
A little philosophical too, if I could get that word out.
A little bit. But yeah, going back in, you mentioned the two big companies, Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
When they put out their stuff, if you're looking at it at a surface level, DC has always been more mythology.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And things that the ancient tropes of storytelling. You had adventure, which was personified in Superman. You had you had mystery stories, which were personified in Batman.
Right?
You had mythology, which was personified in Wonder Woman, and you can go on down the line. Marvel, on the other hand, was sort of created. It had more of a slant towards how is this affecting the real world.
Yeah.
Spider-Man lives in New York City. I'm going back to New York City tomorrow.
I know.
One of the things I'm concerned about is it is incredibly expensive. Spider-Man's concerned with that too. Like one of the greatest.
The money struggle has always been real with him.
Yeah.
My favorite comic panel that I see it all the time because it's so relatable is Tony in his armor, Spidey in his suit, and he just goes, "We have money," and Peter just puts his head on Tony's chest and goes, "Thank God."
Yeah, and all that to say, like the issues that are presented in Marvel have always felt more relatable, down
close to home. Definitely, yeah.
Hit very close to home. And I feel like Star Trek kind of walks that line with, at this point in the franchise, you have these larger than life figures that are almost of historical significance. In this fantastical world where you've got the green-skinned Orions and the blue-skinned Andorians, and people with antennas and people with mandibles and stuff like that. And but at the same time, like on the flip side, it's a lot of diplomacy, and a lot of things that ring true to what we're going through today. How do you think Star Trek comics have set themselves apart, and what's the longevity here? What's the end game? And I guess this goes beyond the comics to more the franchise in general. Like, how do you feel about Star Trek's enduring legacy?
So there's a conversation that I had with my friend Michael Peak. And I call him Tony in my book just because there's another Michael and my name's Michael. Throwing three Michaels in a book just seemed problematic.
Yeah.
But I had a conversation with him, and I asked this question of everybody that I talked to because I wanted to have kind of like similar conversations. Mm-hmm. I was like, if you were to stack D&D, Star Wars, and Star Trek as a franchise, 1, 2, 3, where would you put them? And Tony dug deep. I had to cut so many words. He's such a long talker. Kind of like I am. I'm just drawing this on.
I was gonna say, I know the type. I'm one of those too.
So basically what he said is Star Trek has been and always will be a mirror for where we are.
Yep.
It's set in the future. Sure. We got all of these cool technologies, which some of them are like showing up now. Being able to see each other's faces like this was unheard of 20 years ago. And the political problems that happen in between either different planets or different factions within a planet. Like I said, there's layers in the Klingon political system that they're always warring against each other. We feel that. because we see that. We may not be, political science majors. Not all of us are sitting there hitting the books and getting involved in everything. But now with social media, we see all of this stuff happening, and it becomes very real with just the right amount of lens flare and gloss for us to go, this is the future as well.
Yeah.
And so it's because it's a mirror and it's not a distraction that something like this, even though, like, let's face it, like, what, 3/5 of this comic were about conversations of what a political action would take or how their emotions are going to be. There's no superheroes flying around per se, but each one in there had their own reason and then again a unified reason for being in that same room.
Yeah.
So a story like that, dude, that if more people got more stories like that, and understood it and felt it in the way that some, Trekkies feel every time they turn on a TV or if they're flipping a page, maybe there'd be, it would be even a closer mirror than we think, than one that's slightly askance.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've talked about a lot of the things going on, mostly with these characters. We are following these characters' stories, and although the production team on a comic book is a fraction of the size of the production team of a television show or movie, the question is still relevant. As we do every episode, we ask the question, who do we blame? Now, Star Trek Discovery Aftermath was written by Kirsten Beyer, who we've mentioned her many, many times on this show.
Keeps coming up.
Yeah. She's a wonderful writer with Star Trek credits. She's up to her hips in Star Trek credits. A wonderful career. Hope she continues to write wonderful stories for the franchise. But yes, she wrote this along with Mike Johnson. Now, Kirsten's last work in the franchise was actually season 2, episode 5 of Discovery, which is the Saints of Imperfection, which we discussed with Star Trek drag queen Flip Kiki back over the summer.
Oh yeah.
And Mike Johnson is the other writer. Now, he's had quite an extensive resume as well. So I'll hit a couple of the highlights here. One of the earliest things that I found was he did 19 issues of DC's Superman Batman series. That was in 2003. Then he got on with IDW doing Star Trek Countdown. That was in 2009. That was like the prequel to J.J. Abrams' first movie.
Okay.
And it's pretty great because it's basically from Spock's end before he goes through the black hole, and you get to see an older Worf, an older Data, an older Picard.
Wow.
I don't want to spoil it, but there's some really great stuff, some really cool little Easter eggs, even some tidbits regarding that spaceship, that weird squid looking spaceship that he flies. There's stuff with that as well. I mean, it is a really cool series. I highly recommend it.
So you're just adding to my read list right now. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. After that, he would do Star Trek Nero, which of course goes along with that first J.J. Abrams film. There were 4 issues there. And then he did 59 issues of Star Trek 2011. This was the ongoing series. Yeah, they IDW relaunched the ongoing series, and it was basically if the the Kelvin timeline crew, it's the continuing adventures of that crew. And so there were a lot of like, oh, this issue is kind of like this episode from the original series, and this episode's like this one, and there's tons of that. And when the Computer Resume podcast gets to those episodes in TOS, you better believe we're going to be referencing some of these books. But yeah, he did 59 issues. That's 1 through 17 and then 19 through 60. And in this run with IDW is where he did some work with Star Trek Discovery Aftermath's penciler, Tony Shasteen. So after this, Mike Johnson did an issue of Dynamite Entertainment's Warehouse 13. Did you ever watch Warehouse 13?
It's actually been relatively recent.
Really?
My wife had watched it when it first came out. She only caught a couple of episodes, and then it came out, I think, in its entirety on Hulu. And so she was like, "I used to watch this. You want to watch this with me?" And then, dude, it's that show's great.
It's like a great show. Yeah.
With all of its it's sci-fi campiness at times. It was right up there with, like, it felt like a less serious Fringe, if you've seen Fringe.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
But less serious in a way that it still had its deadly situations. It was great. I could waylay this conversation for that, but it was great.
Yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with Warehouse 13, the elevator pitch for it is, remember that scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark where the Ark is in a crate and you see it going into this massive warehouse? Well, what's it like to work at that warehouse? And that is Warehouse 13.
Who are the top men?
Yes, the top men. Well, Mike Johnson went on to write 17 issues of DC's Supergirl from 2011 and 2012. Then some more Star Trek credits. He did Countdown to Darkness, which was leading up to, of course, the second film in the Kelvin timeline. And as well, Star Trek Khan. There was a 5-issue miniseries focusing on Khan.
Cumberbatch's Khan?
Yes. Which I'm a big fan of. Like, don't get me wrong, Ricardo Montalban turns out an epic performance, a very iconic performance.
Of course.
But in terms of, am I scared of this person? There's Benedict Cumberbatch's Khan has some scary dialogue.
Yeah.
Oh man, and then we'll get back into it. But when he was like, "Well, let's go over it. I will target your life support systems. Your people need air, mine do not. I will walk over your cold corpses." Yeah. Like, oh my god!
This wasn't hyperbole for him. This was just the list of his grocery list. When he set out for this, he's like, "This is what's going to happen."
Yeah,
you're going to die.
Oh yeah. So Mike Johnson would also do issues 1 through 6 of the Star Trek Green Lantern crossover. So fans of DC, there's that. And then he did issue 1 of Dark Horse's 8, and then a bunch more Star Trek credits: Starfleet Academy, Manifest Destiny, Boldly Go, Discovery, Succession. And then here's the other Star Trek crossover that I have not pulled the trigger on yet, but I'm dying to, because I'll say it here and just it's Star Trek versus Transformers from 2018. The reason this sticks out to me is because the Star Trek crew in this book is the crew from the animated series. So you get Emrys and Eric's as part of the away team. Like,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Which Transformers are we talking about? Original animated Transformers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they maintained that style. Like, it looks like those characters just dropped onto the page. It's wild. Really fun. And then of course, Star Trek Discovery, Captain Saru from 2019. That was a 1-issue one-off for Mike Johnson. And this leads me to my apologies to my listeners and anyone who happens to be a fan of this show. Yes, Star Trek Discovery, Captain Saru actually takes place between season 1 and season 2 of Discovery, and I missed it. That's
I had no idea.
I had no idea. And there's so much out there, and there's only so much I can do. It's just me, folks. I'm doing the best I can, but trust me, we will get to it. We will discuss Captain Saru eventually, sometime down the line, and it will be numbered appropriately, in the list of episodes of Computer Resume podcast.
Good, because it was a good read. I'd love to see what other people thought of it too.
It is a really good read. Yeah, it's really dope. I like it. And then just before this, Mike Johnson also penned Blade Runner 2019, which
cool.
came out in 2019, of course. And there was 12 issues there that he worked on. How do you feel about the Blade Runner franchise? It used to just be the one-off movie, but now we've got the sequel, and there were a couple of comic series. How do you feel about Blade Runner as a franchise?
The Blade Runner, the original one, passed me by. It just did.
Yeah.
When it came to the stuff that I would watch for my mom, because I mean, she was a huge part of the reason why I enjoy the geeky stuff that I do.
Yeah.
It was Star Trek, Star Wars, Disney movies. Blade Runner, I guess, maybe was just a little too dark and dystopian. Maybe she didn't, or maybe she didn't even know about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have it in my watch list. So because all this stuff did came up, the sequel came out and everything else. And I've been waiting for a time to watch it, and then other things always come up. So right now I'm living basically vicariously through anybody who mentions it online. Like I've seen so much of it through clips online. I know what's going on. I just need to sit down and watch the whole damn thing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's fun for me because the original Blade Runner first of all, if you love Harrison Ford, like it's great. It's vintage Harrison Ford. It's wonderful. Nice. But a lot of people hear like the sci-fi elements and it's starring Harrison Ford, and I think the thought process is like, oh, it's going to be very Star Warsy, and it's not. It's not. This is the sci-fi movie where you put the kids to bed and then you watch Blade Runner. Like it is dark. It is very noir.
That's what I've gotten the feel of it for the little bit that I've been able to see.
Yeah, it's kind of some longer shots. It can almost hypnotize you a little bit, or like lull you to sleep, as it were. Sure. The action in it is sparse but important.
Yeah.
And we watch Harrison Ford's character, who's of course the central figure, go through a lot of different things in his function as a Blade Runner in this dystopian future. But I think, the sequel, which they talked about a sequel as soon as the credits rolled on the first one. But then we did finally get that. We did finally get that sequel with Ryan Gosling. Yep. And a lot of people were like, I don't know how this is going to play out. I like to consider myself a fairly harsh critic of sci-fi, and it is a true sequel. Like it watches like, oh, this just happened years later in this same world, like visually, musically, production wise, all of this stuff, it is still there. And it's a really seamless transition from the first film to the sequel. And I haven't gotten into a lot of the comics, but what I have read, I've enjoyed. And I also got my hands on the TTRPG of Blade Runner, and that is fascinating as well.
Yeah. And I like detective noir TTRPGs because if they're written well, you're having a good time uncovering things instead of just being thrown right in the middle of things. And I like that.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the day where I can sit down with my home group and say, okay, we're going to take a step outside the medieval setting and we're going to step into the distant future. Everybody flip a coin to see if you're human or not.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. So anyways, and then after Blade Runner is when Discovery Aftermath would come up. Tony Chastain, the pencilers, his resume here starts off in 2006 with Virgin's Devi. I didn't realize that Virgin had a comic book label. I shouldn't be surprised about that, but
Sure.
yeah. Tony Chastain did issue 12. He did the pencils, inks, and colors for that. Then he worked on Conan. He worked on a couple of issues of Conan in 2004 and 2005. He did the DCU Halloween special in 2008. Then Xenoscope's Tales from Wonderland, Queen of Hearts versus Mad Hatter. That was
interesting.
2010. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Then as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of where he hooked up with Mike Johnson on Star Trek, on the ongoing Star Trek series there in 2011. Tony would actually do 22 issues, 35 through 40, 43 through 45, and 48 through 60, doing pencils, inks, and colors in different combinations throughout those issues. And then he would also go on to work on a couple of issues of the Star Trek Green Lantern crossover. He did Star Trek Manifest Destiny. He also did 12 issues of Star Trek Boldly Go. And I think that's before the Aftermath, before Discovery Aftermath. I think that was the last time that they worked together. Then Tony would go on to do Star Trek Waypoint issue 5. He did the cover for that. And then he also did Star Trek Next Gen Terra Incognita from 2018. He did all 6 covers, pencils and inks. Cool. For that series. Yeah. But as of this recording, this is his last work on Star Trek. So
this one we just read?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Tony, we loved your work, man. Hope you come back to Star Trek for some more. It was pretty great. Now, for regular episodes here, Michael, this is normally where I would say, ask the question, is this essential viewing? Yeah. However, this is a comic book. So let's say, is this essential reading? And I'll even take it a step further. Not only is this essential reading, but does these 3 issues, Star Trek Discovery Aftermath, does this feel like Star Trek?
Okay. First off, I just want to ask, because I've been burnt by books in the middle of movies and shows before. Mm-hmm. Is this canon?
From my discussion with Heather Antos, mm-hmm. they are making every effort to get this as close to canon as possible.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel good about that. Yeah. I don't want to revisit the Star Wars literary universe that just got completely erased by the sequels.
Yeah.
But so let's bring it back. Is it essential? Absolutely, because it does feel like Star Trek. Between, like we mentioned, the drawn in light, the art itself, bringing you in. It's not. They could have easily kept the angles like nice and flat, just showing just a scene, but they didn't. They used the page.
Yeah,
it's like New Trek tried to use all the screen. And the interaction between the characters, it feels very much like the way that the actors have established themselves on screen.
Yeah.
And I think it can be, it can be completely due to, hold on, let's see, due to Kirsten Bear's influence. The fact that was brought in, it wasn't like Coming Home. It was like I never left.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Is this essential? I think it depends on what you really value in Star Trek in terms of narrative. I like I said earlier, I love what they did with L'Rell, and I think she's a wonderfully complicated character. Mm-hmm. And this, if nothing else, I think this is a really solid look at the struggle of being in a position of power, knowing what is right for your people, and having to walk that line.
Yeah. The sacrifices and all.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The artwork is stellar. It's hard to give a sense of movement to still images, but I think Tony does a great job of it here. It really does. Every panel just draws you in, and they're not just static images. They do, like you said, they follow suit with New Trek, and they use every inch. They use every inch of that page to showcase this wonderful, wonderful art, and this story by Kristen and Mike that really just adds these wonderful layers to these characters that we already know. We get, besides L'Rell, we get some wonderful interactions with Pike and Spock.
Yeah.
Like, as great as that's been in Strange New Worlds, here it is on the page for you to just read over and over, and just to just
their words were being spoken in their voices. That's how.
Yes.
In my head, I mean, there was I didn't have to force it at all. Yeah, and that was wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, could you watch the end of Discovery season 2 and go right to Strange New Worlds? Sure, but why would you do that? Like,
yeah.
Take some time, take a lunch break and dive into these 3 issues of Star Trek Discovery Aftermath from IDW. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss these comics with me today.
Hey,
do you have any parting thoughts before we go? Thoughts about Aftermath, thoughts about Star Trek comics in general? Another wonderful appearance on the Computer Resume podcast. Any parting thoughts before we start to wrap things up?
Well, I would say 3rd time's the charm, but that would imply that the first 2 didn't go well. But that's definitely not the case. This is always a delight to be here. And you kind of just like reintroduced me into a medium of Star Trek that I kind of, forgot, as I'm looking at my bookcase right now, I'm also reminded I've got like 6 Star Trek novels based off various eras of after the Next Generation. I got 2 Voyagers and something like that. And now I'm thinking, I'm like, I forgot those existed. I need to get into that as well. So for what is probably going to be a hiccup of release when it comes to movies and TV shows due to writing and SAG-AFTRA and everything like that.
Of course,
it's a wonderful way to get some new stuff without having to watch to get some Trek in me without having to watch reruns. So
exactly.
I'm digging the idea of finding some more comic books myself. So
awesome. Well, folks, next week on October 30th, we will have our first of 3 interviews with some legendary Star Trek actors.
Ooh.
I feel like telling you more, but I'm not gonna. You're just gonna have to come back and see who I get to talk to and all the wonderful things that they tell me about their lives and careers. I'm really looking forward to diving into those and releasing those so you guys can enjoy them as well. Michael, didn't you have a book come out or something?
Yeah. I've been keeping it mostly to myself. I don't really tell a lot of people. Just not really proud. No. Yes. God. Oh, I love it. This copy right here, I'm trying not to handle it too much. It's actually one of the ones that are going to be going out to somebody. It's already signed and everything. Yeah, I've done some things with my TikTok. If anybody subscribed onto my TikTok, they got a free signed book, and then I'm handing out signed books to all the people that helped me. So even if you have bought one, you're getting another one. Surprise. But yeah, I was I was going through this book while we were talking because I was trying to remind myself of the conversation that I had with Tony about the difference between Star Trek, Star Wars, and D&D, and that's how the book starts.
Yeah.
Because it's a memoir from age to 5 to 23, and I'd be remiss in telling that story if I didn't, say what my influences were in getting into various geekdoms and fandoms and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I felt like maybe at sometimes I was leaning a little too heavy into one and leaning too heavy into other, but I think by the end of it blended pretty well. The fact that TTRPGs were something that I sought out during my rough times in the military.
Yeah.
The fact that I was on the Enterprise after having such a long and illustrious love affair with Star Trek. And I even talk a little bit about Star Wars. Star Wars doesn't have that much in there, except for one whole thing where I talk about the excitement of the prequels and what that meant to our family.
Yeah.
But it's been such a cool and an amazing journey just to revisit the times that I had with a lot of my friends, because three people are people that I grew up with, one of them being my ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then two of them were shipmates that I had. And I didn't realize exactly how similar our stories were. Like when you're that far down into something, you don't think about other people being like depressed and having a hard time at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to find out, it was like, oh yeah, they were not liking life at that time either. Like we were all having a rough time. And it's not because of the military. It's not the military sucks. Nobody should be in it. The military is definitely of what you make it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the first things I want to tell people. Like there's this one guy, he got mad at an ad I put out on Facebook. And he's like, you should be talking down in the military. And I'm not going to start a conversation with a stranger on the internet. But I did use that as a talking point to other people. It's like, and before anybody, gets mad at saying, hey, I'm downing the military. No, I'm downing my experience in the military. And but if it wasn't for the military, I wouldn't have had the experiences that I did. Some of them were fantastic, and they're in there as well.
Yeah.
So it's a bunch of ups and downs.
Yeah. Such is life.
Yes, definitely.
Give us the title and where can people find your book?
All right. I can do that. It is called DinQ, spelled DinQ, subtitled D&D in the Coffin Hold of the USS Enterprise. And you can get it, surprisingly, you can get it on barnesandnoble.com. They say there's a printed copy, but I haven't tried to get that one yet, but I do know the Nook works.
Nice.
Yeah. And then Amazon, of course, has got the Kindle, it's got the paperback. And then this is not necessarily where people can buy it, but it's something cool that I found out. One of the websites that I gave the book to put it on Nook also gave it to libraries that give out like ebooks for like 35 cents a pop.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. So I may not see anything back from that, but just the fact that it's available in that, which is really cool. So, Amazon.com, you can just search for DinQ. DinQ also means something else that I haven't looked up. So make sure you put Michael LeBlanc with it, because it may not immediately show up. I think it's like something about porcelain cows or something. I'm not 100%, language barriers being what they are.
Listen, it's just, you've just expanded your pool of readers. You're getting your story into the hands of more people.
Hey, your lips to Amazon's ears, man. I hear you.
And where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, Sitting With You, pretty much everywhere. So Sitting With You, all one word, no G. Available on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Still holding on to Twitter until that eventually crashes and burns.
And I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all of the socials. From all of us at the Computer Resumed podcast, thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in 10 Forward.
Support us on Patreon and like, rate, review, and share on all your favorite platforms. Feel free to send us your subspace transmissions to computerresumepodcast@gmail.com or at Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Computer Resume podcast was created and produced by Mr. Todd A. Davis. Our logo was designed by Will Martin and Justin Bishop. The opening theme was produced by Justin Bishop, and our outro music was provided with permission by Dronode. Additional music was provided by Mr. Todd A. Davis and Gary Horn, and the voice of Computer Resume podcast and executive producer, me, Kat Davis. Hashtag LLAP. We'll see you next time.
Going through a Star Trek. We're doing Star Trek stuff in space. We probably got some phasers and shuttle pods, and we're gonna find a brand new race.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?